Hi everyone, and welcome to another season of Sean's Wildlife Podcast. It's great to have you back. This is season 5, believe it or not. There's 35 episodes in the bank already if you're new to the podcast, and you can have a listen to those. But really excited to be back with a bang and welcome a great guest. It's Megan McCubbin. Megan is a zoologist and a wildlife TV presenter. I'm sure you're all familiar with her from the likes of BBC Springwatch and This Morning and BBC Earth. So Megan, thanks for coming on finally and having a chat. We've been talking about it for a while.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on. It's nice coming on and talking all things wildlife. It saves me boring my family. So
Yeah. Nothing new for you coming on talking about wildlife though, right?
It's always the usual. But I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, good stuff. Now it's just about to kick off into September on the last day of August recording this podcast. And last night I watched your brand new TV series, Chris and Meg's Wild Summer. I really enjoyed it. How was that to film?
Thank you. To be honest, it was so much fun. It was really enjoyable to film. I mean, all shoots are great fun to do because you get to go to some incredible places, and hopefully, if the wildlife plays ball, sometimes it doesn't, you get to see some amazing things. And we couldn't believe our luck with this trip, with this journey, to be honest, because I think up until episode 5, I had 100% success rate on everything that we aimed to see. So everything showed up, actually bar one thing. But we don't mention it. It was very painful. It was very painful what didn't show up. You have to watch it to find out what didn't.
Right.
And so other than that one individual species, which is elusive anyway, I saw everything. Chris didn't see. I saw a red squirrel and he didn't, which was brilliant because normally he's.
Oh dear.
So we were really incredibly lucky with the wildlife. So from that front, it was fantastic. The weather couldn't have been better, and it was just so much fun. And we would get to the end of the day and I turned to our wonderful director, Joe, and just said, Joe, did you actually get anything? Because the thing about this series is it's totally unscripted. Normally when we go into a shoot, we've got a mission, we've got facts to hit, we've got, a story to tell. But with this, it's kind of just Chris and I doing our thing. So I turned to Joe and go, did you really get any of that? And he was like, absolute gold. And it's just Chris and I, bickering or talking about the wildlife in front of us, things that we'd normally do, because it really is just us. So it's quite a personal series in many ways, I think.
Yeah, it's very real, and it's kind of like plodding around and kind of discovering what you come across on the way, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got some mission, we know what we want to go and see the day before, or we surprise each other with various different activities or things that we want to go and do, sometimes in our comfort zone, sometimes outside of our comfort zone. And yeah, it's really just kind of a journey throughout England, Wales and Scotland, having a look at some of the gems of wildlife that we've got in terms of, UK wildlife, but also in terms of cultural sites. We went to visit lots of castles, lots of places with historic relevance. So it really was kind of a real mixture of very different things. I think we started off with quite a wildlife aim, particularly in episode 1, but we do broaden it out to talk about, at times, some difficult conversations. We talk about neurodiversity. Obviously, people know Chris very well as being Asperger's. I'm quite severely dyslexic, so we talk about the differences in the way that we approach science and the way that we approach, people and our environment. We talk about modern families. I grew up with, you need a mind map to work out my family, and we speak about, how different it is perhaps from when Chris grew up and what the expectations are of family life today and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's a bit more than just wildlife. It's hopefully got a bit of a kind of a deeper flavour to it as well.
Yeah, it's like a personal kind of story as well as just being kind of fact-based and wildlife-based, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's got some facts in there, Norwegian lundhund, for example. You have to go and watch it to figure out what that was.
I did. I learned about the Norwegian lundhund last night.
Yeah. I mean, I never knew such a thing existed, but there we go. Not entirely relevant to the puffins we were looking at, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I liked your dig back.
Yeah. No, it was really great fun to film, and a brilliant series that I hope people are going to really enjoy.
Cool. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but just for anyone listening that's kind of not familiar with your background and things, tell us a little bit about your sort of background and why you studied zoology, and then maybe your journey into TV presenting as well.
So I started off very early. I met Chris when I was 2 years old. So wildlife was very much part and parcel of growing up. It was kind of everything that I did. In my bedroom, I had every kind of animal that you could probably imagine. I mean, I had all the cute, fluffy stuff. I had the guinea pigs, the gerbils, the poodles, obviously. But I also had praying mantises, cockroaches, tortoise, tarantula, you name it, snake. I probably had it at one point or another. If it was
Familiar story, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. My room is kind of like this kind of miniature sanctuary for all kinds of wildlife that we could possibly have.
Yeah.
Um, so, that was kind of home life. And then when I wasn't at school, I'd be out in the woods. I'd be out, either joining Chris on film shoots or out traveling somewhere. I was really fortunate to be traveling from a really early age and get to go to some amazing places. So I was kind of exposed to wildlife just all around from very, very young. And I always knew that it would be a big part of what I do, but I never really considered a scientific career, if I'm honest. Particularly when I was at school, because as I said earlier, I am quite dyslexic, and I was actually told by one of my teachers that I would never be able to be a scientist. So I kind of
Right.
cut that dream off quite early on. I just didn't think I was capable of doing it because I'm awful at maths, so bad at maths, and I'm so bad, when it comes to certain patterns and things. It turns out I'm not actually bad at it. I just have a very different way of learning it.
Okay.
So it took me a while to kind of get to grips with how I learn science, and it took me a little while. I got some kind of extra support and everything, and changed my kind of career goals. And that was when I started working at the Isle of Wight Sanctuary, which housed now they house all ex-circus and ex-pet trade animals. And I
Right.
totally fell in love with 400 tigers. And I spent every weekend, every summer, every possible minute, second, day, month by these four cats' side. And I kind of grew up alongside them. We were kind of a similar age. Unfortunately, they've passed away now. But it was because of those four cats, really, that I said, no, actually, I want to work in conservation. I want to work doing this. And I had no idea I'd go into the media. And I started working in volunteer placements as much as I could. So every summer. And I really focused on kind of the illegal wildlife trade and rehabilitation. So I went and lived in China for a while, and I was working with vets out there and behavioral ecologists out there, and we were rehabilitating bears that had been rescued from the bear bar farming industry. And then went and worked with rehabilitating cheetahs that had been poisoned and shot at and various different reasons in Namibia, and were being released back into a kind of a conservation area. So I kind of went around and studied as much as I possibly could. I went and did a shark intern, all this kind of stuff that, as much practical experience as I could possibly fit in, and then kind of did my degree. And when I kind of got back from working with the bears, a friend of mine who was currently working at the BBC gave me a call, and she said, we've got this series, it's called Undercover Tourist. We've got a story that's just fallen through, and we need another story as soon as possible. Have you got any ideas? And I said, just got back from China, and I'd never been to a farm.
Good timing.
It was brilliant timing. I'd never been to a farm at that point, and I got to go when we were filming for Undercover Tourist. We went and filmed the bear bar farms in Vietnam, and it was harrowing. It was really, really harrowing to see, and really quite difficult. So that was kind of my first presenting job. I think we filmed that in 2017, and then I've been doing presenting kind of ever since, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, I guess, that really put you in front of a lot of people was what you and Chris did of your own bats, really, at the start of the pandemic with the self-isolating bird club, right?
Yeah. That kind of came out of nowhere, really.
Where did it come from?
Well, I think, I moved in with Chris at the start of lockdown because we did, some campaigns together, and we thought it would be easier to be in the same place so that we could continue to work. So I moved in, and we were kind of sat there, I don't know, twiddling our thumbs a little bit during the day. And then the following day, we noticed a patch of celandines, these wooden flowers, suddenly came out. And I remember I was upstairs in my bedroom, and I looked out the bedroom window, and Chris was there on his phone. And I thought, what is he doing? He's on FaceTime, or he's doing something silly. And it turns out he was actually streaming the patch of celandines live on Facebook. Anyway, within a week, we were doing it together, and we were kind of going and finding wildflowers, we were finding birds, we were finding whatever we could to talk about, and just to showcase, a bit of the natural world on to platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, so that people could enjoy it as much as we were. I mean, we were really lucky and fortunate to be locked down in the middle of the New Forest. We had, a lot of space to explore and connect with nature, and we're critically aware of probably a lot of people stuck, in tower blocks or stuck in city centres, unable to reach the same places and see the same things that we were seeing. So we wanted to kind of lighten things up a little bit and showcase a little bit of natural wonder. And it quickly turned into a bit of a community. We got Fabian Harrison and Kate Crocker on board, and it turned into this like miniature production. And we started doing it every day. I think, we did over 100 hours live. I think we did initially 2 episodes a day, then 1 episode a day. Then we had weekends off towards the end because we got a bit exhausted after broadcasting every.
You're getting burnt out.
Yeah. But it just turned into this most amazing community of people who were either connecting with each other over a new interest for nature and the environment, or had rekindled a love that they once had as a child. And it was amazing because everybody was posting photos and videos and everything. And just to see people connecting when actually people were so disconnected at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think it happened? I saw it definitely, with Ealing Wildlife Group, the amount of posts were going up on there on Facebook. And, I did a few, again, kind of live things as well where people were tuned in and saying, oh, do it again, do it again. Why do you think people did kind of connect so much with nature at that time? Was it because they really needed it? Because we were only getting, 1 hour of exercise a day and everything in the start? Or do you think it was to do with the kind of mental health benefits and the healing power of nature, or all of the above?
Definitely all of the above. I mean, we know that spending time outdoors has massive benefits for our mental and physical health. Even just taking a walk outside today, I felt much better. And I know we're still in a pandemic or epidemic now. I don't remember. It's so confusing what's ever going on in the news. But we're still obviously, with coronavirus still around. But it wasn't quite as stressful, I suppose, as it was then. So I think, it did have major, major benefits for people's mental health. But I also think it provided a bit of escapism. People were able to take a step outside their front door and realize, okay, the world is actually still spinning. The birds are still singing. The bees are buzzing. Things are still continuing in some form of normality in terms of our environment. And I think that provided a lot of comfort to people. But also this kind of idea that we weren't as busy as we were. We weren't rushing out the door. If you've got kids, trying to get them out the door. If you've got to go to work, meetings, or get the train, we weren't stressed in that way. We had more time on our hands. So I think we kind of went outside in our gardens and we started looking at things in a different way. We started, seeing the beauty in the things that we'd walked past probably 100 times and never noticed before, because we had that mind space, we had time, and we had energy to go and look and actually appreciate. We weren't just looking, we were seeing, we weren't just hearing, but we were listening. It's quite a cheesy quote, but it's that kind of thing that we were not just kind of observing, but we were really connecting. And I think people, once they had connected, realized, wow, I feel so much better for doing this. Let's do it more. And that's what I hope people will continue to do as restrictions continue to ease and things start getting back to some sort of normality, whatever that normality
Normal.
is like.
Yeah. I found actually just disconnecting from the computer screen, and walking away and putting my phone in my pocket instead of walking around with it in my hand, catching up on social media stuff. It does make you look at things. It makes you notice things a lot more, doesn't it?
Exactly. One thing I always try to do for 5 minutes on every walk is just to sit down, put everything away, and just sit, because then you notice like the bushes come alive and the trees come alive with birds, and you start seeing things. Otherwise, if you're walking, your brain's too busy processing that information, so it doesn't pick up the little details. Whereas if you just sit and stop, it's amazing what you start to notice.
Yeah, for sure. We heard lots of that. What about kind of, mental health and eco-anxiety we hear about all the time? And, we've connected on the likes of social media. There's a lot of young conservationists, really passionate conservationists now that I see on the likes of Instagram and Twitter, campaigning and championing nature and wildlife and the environment. But we do see a lot of eco-anxiety as well. Do you think that, social media is, obviously it's helping these communities come together and it's helping conservationists talk to their tribes and things, but do you think sometimes it can be a double-edged sword, that this kind of echo chamber we're all in is maybe doom and gloom a lot of the time, or we're all kind of have eco-anxiety together and are making it worse, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I think things are shared more easily. Obviously, it's just one button and things are shared across the world for anybody to see. It is definitely a double-edged sword. With social media, it's such a valuable and important tool for conservation and growing those communities, but it's also something to just, really kind of take note on how you're using it, and how you want to feel at the same time. I think the media coverage of, the massive disasters that we've seen, whether that's the wildfires, the drought, the flooding, we're seeing more of those images now than we would have done 10, 15, 20 years ago, simply because of that share button on social media. Those things weren't
Yeah.
happening then as much as they are now because of obviously climate change. But things, the disasters and bad things are being shared much more easily. But that being said, so are the good things as well. So, you've got to really kind of hang on to the good things, notice the bad, learn from the bad, talk about the bad, because we need to face those bad things head on. But yeah, I mean, if you need a break, take a step back. Don't worry about, signing off social media for a little while. That would be my biggest thing. Sometimes if I feel a bit bogged down by it, I just take a couple of days and I just don't log on. And it makes me feel so much better, because I think sometimes you need to kind of reconnect yourself a little bit, because it is a lot of doom and gloom. And you can kind of fall into a pit trap quite easily. But that's why I think I'm so grateful for the community that's also on it, because sometimes loving what we do so passionately, loving wildlife, loving an environment, can feel incredibly isolating. You can feel like you're fighting a massive battle on your own. And having connected with like-minded people, you realize very quickly that you aren't, and you might not live next door to one another. You might be frustrated with your neighbors because they're putting in artificial lawn, or they're doing something, horrific for the environment, and you feel
Yeah.
alone and you feel like you're on an island. But actually, you come on social media and there's people that are the same as you, wanting to achieve the same things as you and willing to have those conversations. So for me, whilst it does have its negatives, the positives are brilliant, but you just have to learn how to use it without the detriment to your own mental health. And that, I think, takes time. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. I'm far from it. I get down, sometimes seeing things, but that's the state of the world we live in at the moment, is that it isn't all, rainbows and birds and bees and butterflies. It's kind of
No, absolutely
wildfires
not.
and
But
drought.
yeah, I see the pressure people put themselves under though sometimes on social media, and I'm definitely the same as you, that if there's too much, or there's been too much going on, or too much like social media noise in my head, and I've been on the phone 6 hours that day, I'm like, put it away, go out for a walk, put it down. But I see people putting pressure on themselves, or coming back after a break and be like, I'm so sorry I was gone, and I'm really sorry I had to take a break. And I always say, don't apologize, just
Yeah,
take the break. People
exactly.
shouldn't feel under pressure to do that, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, it depends what field you're in. I mean, for me, I definitely feel a pressure to post frequently, because I have to kind of communicate with the audience that I'm trying to build an audience, ultimately trying to build a platform so that I can hand it over to other people to share their stories.
Mm,
The people that really are at the forefront of conservation, or the people that are really struggling in the face of the climate. I'd love to build a platform to hand over to them so that they can get their word out. So for me, I feel like pressure in order to post every day, to keep building that platform, to keep building that momentum. And I think it can get overwhelming. It can get too much. Are you posting the right thing? People going to respond okay to this? Is this the right message? Because people are incredibly sensitive. Social media can be a bad place if you post the wrong thing. And I think
mm,
in some ways it's got too sensitive. In other ways, it hasn't got sensitive enough. So it really is
yeah,
kind of a juggling act in many different ways. It's really not easy. But yeah, if you ever need to take a break, never feel guilty about it. I mean, I certainly don't. When I need a break, I'm just, I've learned that I have to, when I get to that point, you have to just take a step back and take a breather. And that's okay to do it.
absolutely, yeah. Also, I think the thing that can happen, and especially now, people are annoyed and angry and frustrated, and it seems like there's just way more like sniping and kind of cattiness or criticism around social media. Just, it's not, at this point in time, I think people are just done with the whole pandemic, they're done with lockdowns, they want to get back to normal. There seems to be a lot more kind of infighting, or even cruelty on social media, people not agreeing with each other and being quite horrible to each other, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. I think exactly that is due to a lot of frustration and a lot of anger about the state of the world. I mean, you just have to go on BBC News website and it's disaster. It's horrible. It's really, really
Mm,
nasty. And I think we've kind of crossed that line in knowing how to communicate effectively our different opinions without getting personal. Many
yeah,
people these days confuse that and get personal rather than giving a constructive thought or a constructive criticism. And there's a very big difference. Um,
yeah,
so if you are online, you do have to be be kind. Be kind that there's a person at the other end of that account. That's a real human being there, and I guarantee you they're reading the comments. No matter how many followers they've got, I guarantee you they're probably reading the comments. So just be cautious and be kind to people, because everyone's struggling, everyone's frustrated, everybody wants to get back out there and get maybe a new kind of normal, a more environmentally friendly normal is what I'd like. But we all want to get there. So just be more tolerant of one another, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I notice a big difference now. Like, I previously interviewed a guy who shoots deer, culls deer, kind of overpopulated deer on farmland and things, and he describes himself as a conservationist. And I did a podcast with him probably about a year and a half ago, and I posted it on my Instagram, and it was all quite constructive chat with all kinds of viewpoints. There was vegans on there saying well, if you're going to eat meat, actually that's high welfare meat and the animal has lived a natural life, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But this time around, I posted it again recently, it kicked off in the comments. I just think people are sort of at a low boil at the moment, and they're just like really, really frustrated and ready to kick off on certain things.
It's interesting, isn't it? It really does matter the timing in which you post things. But I mean, that's an important conversation to have, and one that people do feel emotive about. But it's sustainable shooting for ecological reasons. I have to say, we don't have predators in the UK. What else is there to do? We have too many deer. It's a shame. I would never pick up a gun in my life. I'd never want to hurt any animal. I couldn't physically bring myself to do it. But obviously there are people that can. And I live in the New Forest, and it's all decimated. The deer are just horrendous, absolutely horrendous, and they do cull them in this area. And it's getting slowly better. But for the benefit of our national nature reserves and our national parks and for other wildlife, it kind of needs to happen. Or the other controversial opinion is, where are the predators? Should we bring some of those back?
Well, I was just going to say, shall we go off on a tangent and say, well, we bring back the lynx, bring back the wolves.
Yeah. Well, I'm all in for it. Let's say that.
Okay. Do you think it will happen in our lifetime?
I'll probably be a very, very old one. Maybe I don't know. Definitely, certainly not wolves and bears. Maybe I might be a very, very old woman. I hope lynx would happen in my lifetime. I'd hope.
I think lynx will happen. Yeah.
I'd hope so. We're just getting
Fingers
there as
crossed.
eaters. So.
And the beavers are back already, right?
Yeah, well, we're getting there. Definitely coming
getting
back.
There.
Still controversial for some, but we're getting there.
I know. We're talking about bringing beavers back to Ealing, so watch this space.
That'd be very exciting.
Beavers back in the capital would be great, wouldn't it?
We love that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The more beavers.
So I recently enjoyed. I've been buying books left, right, and centre because there's so many good books coming out at the moment, and obviously I was one of those ones. Oh, I'll have loads of time during the pandemic, so I bought piles of books, and I haven't read half of them. But I also invested in an audio app. Many available, no particular one recommended. But I listened to your book that you wrote with Chris while I was driving in the car recently. Really, really pleasantly surprised by it. I knew it would be good, but I thought what I took from it was really inspiring in terms of taking action and doing things, and very much kind of a call to action to get involved with conservation and climate change and biodiversity loss and things. So can you tell us just a little bit about where that came from? I'm sure it's been kind of brewing as an idea with you and Chris for a long time, has it?
No, well, it happened pretty fast, if I'm honest. We finished Self-Isolating Bird Club. We got to the end of Springwatch, and we were approached by publishers that said, do you want to do a book together? And our fabulous publishers there, Two Roads Publishing, they kind of had the idea of something based around SIBC, and we wanted something with a real purpose, but based on the community that we built. So Chris and I very quickly came up with this idea of a book where we talk about conservation in the UK, the environment in the UK fundamentally, but we talk about the different levels in which people can take part in that conservation. So initially it starts off quite locally, what you can do as an individual, then what you can do as a community, what you can do in your local nature reserves, and then building up into the bigger issues in terms of politics and activism. So it kind of builds up in a step-by-step process, I suppose. It's quite, I'd say, challenging at times because it's a very honest and perhaps very critical account of what is happening in our countryside. Some kind of hard truths in there. But in amongst all of that, I tried to kind of remind people about why we're fighting for what we're fighting for. So I put nuggets of kind of really amazing, mind-blowing science in there to kind of just make you go, wow, that's incredible. Who knew that butterflies had hearts in their wings? Who knew that, dragonflies had that many lenses in their eyes and could see an ultra color? I mean, what is ultra color? I mean, I can't even imagine what ultra color is. And so, it's all these kind of amazing kind of gems of incredible science, but mixed in with some really hard kind of topics and debates, talking about reintroductions, rewilding, and lots of different kind of stuff. It's a lot crammed into a book, I have to say. But, I'm glad what you took out of it was action, because that was kind of the purpose, is getting people to feel motivated enough to do something. It doesn't have to be big, but something,
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah. Because I think we can all get bogged down, and we can all feel, pessimistic, or my little voice isn't going to make a difference, to these big topics. And there's sort of a sense sometimes of like, if everyone just, sorted that out, or, I'm not going to make a difference on my own. But I think, the takeaway message really is everyone can do something small or big to kind of get things done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is just that. I think one of the most toxic kind of ideologies that we have in our heads is this idea that I'm only one person, what could I do to make a difference? Because ultimately that's just an excuse to carry on as normal. And we know, look at the news, normal is not okay. We are not living in a healthy environment, and we need that healthy environment to sustain wildlife, to sustain ourselves. So yeah, the idea is that everybody can do something. It only takes one person to start a movement. If you don't want to think that big, you can, wake up tomorrow and think, okay, maybe I'll have one meatless day. Okay, maybe I will walk or cycle or get the bus to work. Or maybe, you wake up tomorrow and do one thing different than the day that you did before. Buy a reusable water bottle. It doesn't matter what the thing is, but just wake up tomorrow and do something, anything differently. And celebrate the small things as well. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. A lot of people say to me, well, I would do this, but then I do this as well, and I'm not really willing to give that up, or that. It's just that you don't have to be perfect. I'm certainly not. As a living organism on this planet, we are having an impact. That's matter of fact. And I try and reduce my impact as much as possible, but it doesn't mean to say I couldn't be doing more, because I definitely could. Every person could be doing more. So celebrate the small things. Don't feel like you have to be perfect, and just start small and work your way up and build your confidence in it. And don't be afraid to kind of reclaim the word activist, is what I'd say, because this word, for some, I think, has a negative connotation to, but actually for me, I wear it as a kind of a badge of pride. If you feed the birds, in my opinion, you're active in your environment, therefore you're an activist. If you put a hedgehog highway in, then you are an activist. If you go out and join a protest, then you're definitely an activist. Whatever activism means to you, that's what matters. But just do something.
Yeah. I think some people shy away from the kind of activism, or going out and kind of even lobbying the government, or going on a protest and things like that, because they're nervous of conflict. Maybe they're also probably nervous of making enemies or having backlash with people with different viewpoints. That's something that I definitely know, from following Chris for a long time. He's had to deal with a lot of horrible stuff coming his way because of his viewpoints and his kind of being outspoken on certain issues. Have you had any of that kind of backlash as well, or is it something you shy away from? Or
I don't shy away from it. I think in order to make progress, we have to sometimes be bold, and sometimes we have to say things that sometimes people don't always want to hear. But we're not saying it to annoy anyone. We're simply saying it to start a conversation. To start a conversation about some sort of change. So yeah, sometimes, depending on what I'm talking about, there can be a bit of a negative backlash. But for me, human beings don't like changing their minds, and when you ask them to change their mind about something that they're not ready to change, then there is sometimes resistance. But the things that I've given up that I love doing, but I don't do anymore. I always have this idea that with new science coming out all the time, every single day, it's hard, but I have to try and challenge myself to like reflect on what I'm doing and think, okay, am I doing the right thing, and how can I change? How can I evolve with this ever-growing fountain of knowledge that's coming out of our scientists that are researching the very latest on all these kind of losses and catastrophes that our natural world is seeing. And I think, we just have to be aware of our own behaviour. Sometimes look inward on ourselves, and I think people struggle doing that because sometimes looking inward isn't an easy thing to do. It certainly isn't at times. And to hold your hands up and say, "Oh, I was doing something bad that I shouldn't have been doing," it's bad. I remember a couple of years ago, I took a flight to Glasgow. And I would, like, now I would never do that. I'm not taking any kind of internal flights around the UK. But a couple of years ago I did it, and I feel awful about it now. I recently have been up in Scotland. I've just been to the Hebrides, and it was a 12-hour drive. But it was still only 12 hours, and it actually, a few bit of music, a few card games, pass the time away perfectly.
Yeah. I've battled with that recently. I'm going down to Cornwall soon, but I'm driving. I'll just make it work. I'll get up super early and I'll go. Like, I'm not going to fly to Cornwall.
Yeah.
But I did do something that I'm really not proud of, Megan.
What did you do?
I bought plastic succulent plants.
Oh.
And I'm like, don't buy plastic plants. But I had this, in my bathroom, there's no natural light. And someone was like, oh, just buy plastic ones. And I was always like, no, I'm not buying plastic ones. Not buying plastic ones. And I saw these realistic plastic ones and I thought, do you know what? I'll have them for a long time. And I bought them. And now every time I look at them, I'm like, you idiot. You bought plastic plants. This is totally against everything you stand for. What are you doing? So I have shame now every time I walk into my bathroom.
No, but like you say, that's something you're going to be using for a long time. It's not like a disposable single use or anything. So that's something you can give, and you can give your friends, and they can be passed down for generations, and it can sit in other people's dark bathrooms looking pretty.
Thank you. You're very kind. But no, I'm like really annoyed with myself. Yeah. So there's a little confession that I've had. We're not perfect.
No,
we sometimes
we're
make
not.
decisions.
I do stuff like that all the time and think, God, did I need to buy that?
I know.
Did I really need that new top? Did I? Probably not. Really.
Yeah.
But it's about being critical. The fact that you're having, this thought and kind of self-reflecting and stuff, something, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in the book, you go into quite a bit of detail because you spent a lot of time with Extinction Rebellion. And they're quite a kind of controversial to some group in terms of their methods and their motivations. What was your kind of takeaway with spending so much time with them?
Well, I actually initially got involved with them because I made a documentary about them for Al Jazeera. I kind of went to all their training camps. I got trained in how to get arrested and how to be civilly disobedient, basically. I have to say was quite a lot of fun. Being a bit disobedient, being a bit naughty. But that was all just training and stuff. I didn't actually I have been to many kind of Extinction Rebellion protests. I've never got arrested. I've never or paint anywhere. I've never participated in anything quite like that. I've carried a few, I think coffins and things like that down the street, bits and pieces.
Yeah.
To be honest, when you're in the middle of an XR protest, you really get the sense of community. It is one of the most inclusive and happy, bizarrely happy, because obviously you're talking about something that's not very happy. Experiences, really. Everybody is so friendly and so welcoming, and you're not pushed to do anything that you don't want to do. You don't, people think if you join XR that you have to go and get arrested, and that is just not the case whatsoever. There's many ways of kind of supporting it from afar. I have to say, more recently I haven't been as involved with XR as I would have been. I think XR is brilliant on many levels, absolutely brilliant on many levels. That when they came in at the right time, they did it absolutely wonderfully. They created these conversations that otherwise people just weren't having, whether you like them or not. People were sat home in their living rooms going, what are they doing? What are they thinking? But then they ended up...
Why have they shut down London?
Exactly. But then they started talking about the climate. So ultimately, it worked. It did work. It got people thinking, and it did get people talking, whether you agree with their methods or not. And someone posed this question to me, and it actually really stuck with me, is, at what point does it come ethical? At what point, does it come moral to break the law if that law is unethical? So, there's a lot of areas in that question, I think, that you could explore. And I think, if something is unethical, if a law is unethical, it doesn't necessarily mean we should be continuing to abide by it, especially when it comes to the kind of fossil fuel industry and subsidies and the way that we treat our environment and the wildlife within it. So, yeah, it did, hit home in a lot of places for me joining XR for the time that I did, and I still very much support a lot of what they do. The thing about XR is that they are a decentralized movement, and that essentially means that nobody is in charge. There's no hierarchical system. Anyone can join in, and you can basically create actions and use XR name. So basically, a lot of people might not agree. So if I went in and I had this ridiculous idea to, I don't know, let's use the example that I didn't agree with. So unfortunately, some protesters, not all of XR, but some protesters did go to David Attenborough's house and protest on his lawn. Now, if I came up with that idea, and said, "Oh, this is what I want to do," they could all say, "Oh, I'm not sure that's a brilliant idea," but I could still do it under XR's name because it's decentralized. So unfortunately, movements and actions like that, as well as there was a couple of things getting on top of trains and various different things that just weren't quite on the mark, if I'm honest. And I think a lot of people in XR would also agree that wasn't quite.
That seems like a bit of an own goal, doesn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't the smartest decision. It wasn't the best thing to do. So for me, there's a lot of support that I do have for XR, and a lot of love for the people that are really at the heart of it. A lot of the founders, I think, are some of the most amazing and intelligent people I've ever met in my life. I have to admit, a lot of them are ex-professors, ex-lecturers. They've got PhDs. These are really, really smart people doing this. They're really very intelligent, and they're kind of portrayed as something different on social media, probably because of actions like going and protesting outside David Attenborough's house, which I don't know who came up with that idea, but it wasn't good. So yeah, for that reason, I still support, definitely, a lot of what they do, but I'm more cautious, shall we say.
Yeah, fair enough. But it has inspired other kind of activism and other groups to pop up as well. Tell us about Animal Rebellion. That was something that you had up your sleeves, right? Or
Wildlife Rebellion. Yeah. So one of the things with XR, obviously, is that a lot of the groups, you can go and get arrested and, be civilly disobedient, which I happen to think is brilliant. It's the same strategy as the civil rights movement. It's the same as women's rights, all of this kind of stuff, suffragettes. So it's really, XR only really ever harness the tactics that have worked so well in history. So everyone kind of talks about it as if this is a new strategy, going and sitting on the streets peacefully and democratically, singing, music, whatever it might be. This little I call it a festival with a purpose. A lot of their big London demonstrations are a festival with a purpose. And then a lot of people can opt in to get arrested if they wish to do so. You're warned by the police, so the police have to give you one warning. And if you don't abide by that, then you can be arrested. We came up with the idea of Wildlife Rebellion because we wanted to highlight the biodiversity crisis and the biodiversity loss as much as climate change, and a lot of the other kind of human rights elements that were coming out of XR at the time. And we felt there was this kind of gap with no one was really talking about biodiversity. And we also wanted to kind of make it was kind of like a family-friendly activism group. So everything with Wildlife Rebellion was going to be non-arrestable. So it would be lots of actions that would be pre-planned and pre-approved, so you wouldn't get arrested for taking part in them. But they would still definitely have a cheeky side, shall we say. They would still be a little bit naughty, so it would feel like you were doing something.
Treading that line, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Being naughty, but not being too naughty. And so, the idea was that it would be good for people that wanted to get involved in activism, that really wanted to join XR, but were a little bit fearful or a little bit unsure about the methods, and they could come to us and help us highlight biodiversity loss. And whether they build their confidence up and get to know XR and join XR, then that's brilliant. Or whether they kind of want to come along with the kids for a day out, dropping seed bombs and arrows that they shouldn't really. But what's the worst that can happen is the beautiful flowers and
bit of guerrilla gardening. You can't beat it.
Exactly, some guerrilla gardening. So that was kind of the premise for it. But unfortunately, we launched the day that lockdown 1 was announced. So we were kind of head in our hands thinking, oh, we've got these actions, we're ready to go. I mean, we were literally about to click go, and we had to put a pause in it. And as of yet, we haven't relaunched just yet. I think we are kind of ready to go and waiting for the right time, I think, when people are ready for it. Because obviously, we can't go and have a kind of a very targeted government campaign when the government was at the time incredibly preoccupied with the coronavirus pandemic. So, you have to choose your time wisely. And like you said earlier, people on social media have a short tolerance at the moment. And it's kind of choosing the right time to launch something. It's okay, I think, when something's already been launched and has already kind of been established. But we wanted to kind of wait to establish ourselves until there was more of a, I don't know, as we say,
more of an appetite or more time to
exactly.
consider
People
things.
were ready to take part in that kind of thing again. And I think we're getting there. I think we're pretty close, hopefully.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, yeah, the book was great. Really, kudos on that. I enjoyed it on my travels. Very good. Very good.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's quite, it's quite challenging at times, but interesting. I hope people found it.
Yeah. Any more books on the horizon, do you think?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, there might be.
Can you say any more?
I am working on one at the moment.
Great.
Yeah, I've been able to interview some amazing people from around the world who are really fighting on the very, very edge for certain species that are, touch and go as to whether they'll be here in 10, 20, 50 years time. So
Brilliant.
yeah, that's all I'll say about it. But yeah, I'm still
Good
working on it.
stuff.
It's very much a work in progress.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks. Good stuff. Exclusive. So going back to the TV show then, how many episodes are we in for? I watched the first one last night, but how many episodes are there?
There's 6 altogether, 6 half an hours.
Okay. And you've just finished the last one, right?
Yeah, literally. I think we got back from shooting a couple of days ago. We had to push the last final episode, which was in the Hebrides, back a little bit. So yeah, it's a fast turnaround. So everyone in the edit's doing an amazing job getting it out really quick. Yeah, I mean, it was all about summer, so it's nice to have it. Obviously, we're heading into autumn now, but it was kind of nice to have it relatively close to summer as much as we possibly could. So yeah, hopefully it kind of bridges that gap a little bit for the watchers, and people will enjoy a little bit of escapism wildlife whilst they wait for Autumn Watch to come back.
Good stuff. So give us the plug. It's on every Sunday evening, is it?
It's on every Sunday evening at 8:30 on BBC Two and BBC iPlayer. Yeah, half an hour long with Chris and I just chatting absolute nonsense as usual, and going to see some beautiful wildlife in some pretty amazing places.
Yeah. I was quite tickled with the fact that he calls you Beast.
Yes, he does.
What is that about?
So when I was little, I was Mini Beast, and then I grew up and I graduated to Beast. So
okay,
it's all just, yeah. I've always been called Mini Beast or Beast. I don't really know how it originated. I think probably Terrible Twos or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Good stuff. No, it was nice. It's good to see your relationship and banter on screen as well.
Yeah,
good fun.
Bickering.
Yeah. So, what would you say, Megan, people can do? I mean, you've talked about, lobbying or getting behind certain causes and things like that, but do you have any top tips for people who maybe are feeling anxious about climate change or about biodiversity loss and things like that? Any practical tips on what they can do to make themselves feel better or to get involved or to make a difference?
Definitely. So, I'd say reach out to like-minded people, because really it's a very welcoming community. It's a wonderful place to have conversations and to kind of spark the imagination and feel motivated again and make yourself feel better. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, say hello, and get involved in the conversation, because getting involved and getting your thoughts out there can really be a great thing. And also just take the time to go and reconnect with what you love. Sometimes you have to remind yourself of what you're fighting for. So go out and take time in wildlife, put your phone away, sit down still for 5 minutes, whatever that might be. And there's things that you can do in your garden to encourage biodiversity. And we know that an increased level of biodiversity in our back gardens actually equates to a significantly higher amount of serotonin in your brain, makes you feel happy. So more wildlife in your garden, the happier you feel. So go in, put a hedgehog highway if you've got a CD case, if you still have one of those. I don't know that I do anymore, but if you remember what one of those looks like, cut out a hole that's the same size as a CD case in your fence. Maybe you can ask your neighbour first, just to create kind of a highway for hedgehogs. It's also great for amphibians and frogs, toads, and everything else as well, other small mammals too. And then maybe just go and knock on your neighbour's door and say, like, do you mind about this hedgehog highway? And then go and knock on the next door and get them to do it. So create, a huge area.
Have a whole hedgehog street.
A hedgehog street, exactly, a wilder street, which is great. Connect with your community and start doing that, because there will be like-minded people out there that aren't too far away from you that really feel and want to do the same. So make those small changes. Wildlife ponding doesn't have to be big. A washing up bowl. There's so much that you can do to encourage wildlife into your local space and go out and experience it and just connect with those people. But also, if you are really struggling with eco-anxiety, there are professionals out there that are now, trained and, ready to help if you do need it.
Yeah, great tips. I always say as well, if you don't have a garden, a window box. Just There's little things you can do, isn't there?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what size you've got. If you've got a windowsill, there's always something that you can do for wildlife. Always something. Yeah. Even there's a really amazing study where they kind of looked at people's brains as they were watching wildlife documentaries, and they found that people watching nature, even on a screen, is almost as good as seeing it in real life.
Really?
Yeah, it makes us feel so much better. It's not quite as good. Obviously, it's always better to be in the moment. You can see the sounds and the smells and everything else. But it's almost as good as watching it and being there in real life. So, put on a nature documentary. Who doesn't love, right? Mixture of wildlife with David Attenborough's voice. I mean, come on, it doesn't get much better than that. That doesn't make you happy.
I know. Total hero. Brilliant.
Exactly. His voice is enough to make anyone smile.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I ask most guests, I sometimes forget, but I've remembered this time, to tell our listeners about 3 social media accounts you would recommend personally that they follow if they're interested in wildlife and nature and our environment.
It's a tricky one because there's so many wonderful people out there. I would say one of the accounts that I'm really loving at the moment, and it's about more than just wildlife, it's about kind of the environment. It's a little bit about politics, a little bit about, it's the state of the world, everything really. I'm not sure if I can say this word on the podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's shit you should care about. And it really is stuff that you should care about.
You're absolutely fine to say that. But say it again because there was a little bit of a break up there.
It's called shit you should care about. And
great,
I never like to swear, but that's the name of the account, and you did ask, so
yeah. And I gave you special permission before that you can.
Did. You gave me special permission beforehand. And it's a really kind of interesting platform where they just share things that you really should care about, and it's actually that it's all accredited and everything like that. So it's that's an interesting one that I would say you'd have to go to.
Yeah.
I would say another one. One of my favourite photographers, Paul Nicken, who is just unbelievable Nat Geo photographer. He's just, photos are just astounding. It's just, if you want some, natural beauty on your timeline, definitely go and follow him.
What's his name again?
Paul Nicken.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah.
And then
I'm making notes now.
A third one, I would say, this is tricky. This is very, very tricky. I would go follow Chicks for Climate. Chicks for Climate is good. It's not just for chicks, not just for women, but they talk about kind of obviously climate change and a lot about kind of women in science, which is actually quite empowering. As a woman in science myself, it's nice, hearing from some incredible like female leaders out there doing some really cool stuff, and it's all about climate, and it's really interesting.
Great. Well, I'm going to follow all those 3. I think I do follow Paul, but yeah,
he's a good one.
Stuff. Yeah. So what's next then? You've given us a top exclusive that there's another book in the pipeline, but anything else coming up next that you want to share?
So another book in the pipeline. This month in September, I am the spokesperson for Go Organic, which is a campaign all about Organic September. Try and go as
great,
as you can, because it's good for the soil, good for wildlife, good for domestic animals, and good for people. So I'm going to be talking a lot about the benefits of going organic as much as you possibly can, and then like a few more bits and pieces coming off, a few more talks and various different things, which I'll be chatting about on my social media at some point, I'm sure.
Great. And your social media handle for anyone that doesn't follow you is?
On Instagram, it's Megan McCubbin Wild. On Twitter, Megan McCubbin, and same as Facebook, Megan McCubbin.
Perfect. Cool. Well, look, Megan, it's been really great chatting to you. Thanks for taking the time. I'm sure you're bombarded at the moment with the TV show out and everything.
Not at all. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. It's been great.
No worries. And we'll talk soon, hopefully in person.
Thanks, Sean. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Sean's Wildlife Podcast, please do hit like and subscribe and consider giving us a review. It all helps with promoting it to a wider audience. And tune in again. Season 5 is shaping up to be a good one. Over and out from myself and Megan. Bye.